And when Blender is open, we're going to do just a new general file. Now, does everyone have a beginner understanding of object mode for putting in your objects, moving them about, and then edit mode for editing your objects? It's like the selection arrow and then the direct select in Illustrator. All right, cool. So now that I'm starting to like slowly build your way up into it so that you have a bit more confidence tackling it. Because I see the way some people, like if you just dive into Blender tutorials without a knowledge of topology and edge flow and things like that, it'll be a harder learning curve. So hopefully the way I'm doing it is a little bit more helpful. Is everyone feeling like they're picking up the program okay? Well, guess what we're doing tonight? But we can work on shading at some point. Actually, nope, even better. What's the name of this class? Motion. Yep, motion. So tonight we're going to be doing some motion. And what was the first animation we did in class? So you're going to do the bouncing ball with squash and stretch in a full 3D program. Yeah, it's going to be fun. That's my name. Don't wear it out. I'm going to do just a few new modeling things first, and they're really short and sweet. So if you want to follow along, you can, or if you want to just send out mean tweets about me, that's fine too. All right, so I'm in object mode. I'm going to hit tab to go to edit mode. And here's a new one. The knife tool. That's the letter K on your keyboard. You see my icon change to a knife. I just click and drag as many times as I want to make new cuts from edge to edge. And when I've got all the cuts I want, I hit the enter key. You've got to hit the enter key. Now it creates the new geometry. That's how you accept the new geometry. Everyone got that? So what I could do is I could hit E and extrude this downward like such. So I would have had a really hard time trying to do this with edge loops. Everyone see the benefit of the knife tool? All right. Now, speaking of edge loops, I'm going to hit A to select all, and then Control R for my edge loops until I'm able to get a horizontal cut. And then I'll just do a couple of them with my mouse wheel. Left click to accept. I'm going to slide these down just for a change of pace, and then left click to accept that. Click off it. Once you've been able to add some loop cuts, let me know. All right, so here's what I want you to do. So remember, up here, that's vertex select, edge select, and face select. Or you could hit 1, 2, 3. We're going to be using number 2 on your keyboard. And I want you to pick any one of these edges. Just select it, then hit the X key on your keyboard, X. And we're going to do dissolve edges. And look, just like that, it's gone. Okay, so if I don't want this edge right here, X, dissolve edges, and that got rid of those. See, this is not connected to that loop. So if I do dissolve edges, that was connected to it. So you gotta be careful. See, it's feeding right through the back right there. That's what that is. Now here's the next new thing I'm going to show you real quick. And then we're almost done the new stuff for modeling. Does everyone still have a couple of edges from their loop cut? All right, here's what we're going to do. We're still in edit mode. Press the letter C on your keyboard to get the circle. The circle is a fun way of selecting things. Like watch this. If I click and drag, I've got these selected. I got this edge by accident. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click on that bottom edge to deselect it. So just clicking will select. If you hold down Shift and click, you'll deselect. So if you get something you don't want, just hold down Shift. Otherwise, just clicking over it will select it. When you've got the edges you want to delete, hit the Escape key to exit the circle and accept that selection. So is everyone able to get that selection? So now I can hit X, dissolve faces, and they're gone. So rather than having to, it's almost like lasso selecting, but in 3D. So the circle is a really quick way of selecting things and saving yourself some time. Make sense? Okay, so the new stuff, knife K to do the knife cuts. Then you have to hit the enter key to accept the new geometry. The circle tool, you just draw what you want. And if you want to deselect something, you hold down Shift and click it. And then to accept your selection, you hit the Escape key. All right, now let's see if that's all the new stuff I wanted to go over tonight. Okay, so that's the new stuff for modeling, we're still going to learn some new stuff along the way of doing the bouncing ball. So I'm in my object mode. I'm going to hit X and delete my cube. So all I've got is a light and a camera. Is everyone able to delete their cube? This is the world origin. It's the default crossroads. There's, this is saying this is the 0 point. We've not traveled any distance in X, Y, or Z. All right. It's ground zero. Everyone got that? Makes sense? That's where all objects are going to be, wherever you add the 3D cursor at. All right. So I'm going to do Shift A, add mesh plane. We're going to use the plane as the floor for our bouncing ball. And I'm going to hit S to scale this up a whole bunch. And that's fine. When everyone's able to add a plane, let me know. That's a secret. So it was Shift A, mesh plane. And then I hit S to scale it up by dragging. So we are not moving the world origin point. We're going to keep it where it is for now. And we're going to go Shift A, mesh. Now, you've got UV sphere and you've got Ico Sphere. UV sphere is a sphere made up of quads. Ico Sphere is a sphere made up of triangles. Okay, that's the difference. We're going to use a UV sphere. And it's a little bit on the ground plane, so I'm going to hit G. And then Z is my upward direction. And now it's above the ground. Let me know when you've added a plane and a UV sphere. All right, everyone good? I'm going to hit the tilde key right below my escape key, and I'm going to choose right. I'm going to switch to my camera view, which you can't do because you don't have access to any of these menus up here. All right, so I'm going to do my tilde into my camera view. And just a reminder, if I hit the N key and then go to my view tab on the side, I can do camera to view, and this will lock my view. So this is the fast, easy way of navigating your scene. And then if I want to zoom in, I could just unclick off it. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room for animating and then go back to it. Just a reminder, if you hold down Shift and you press down on the mouse, the middle mouse button, that is your pan side to side. Up and down is your tilt. If I just press down on my middle mouse and orbit around, that's your orbit view. And just scrolling up and down on my mouse will do a zoom in or a zoom out. So your question was, how did I move the camera? So I hit the N key to put my side panel, and I clicked on camera to view. Now try scrolling your mouse wheel up or down. Oh, make sure you're in camera view by going tilde view camera. All right, now is it working for you? All right, excellent. Yeah, it stopped me at any point. Okay, so we've roughly got our scene, and I'm going to make my plane just a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm happy. In After Effects, your workflow is think of what you want to do, figure out how to do it, then move the anchor point, then you move the playhead, then you click on the stopwatch you want to animate. Got it? Here's your workflow in Blender. Think about what you want to do, figure out how to do it, then move your origin point. On my sphere, let me zoom in a little bit. I'll go to my right view. This orange dot, dead center of my sphere. See, as I move around, it's always dead center. By default, the origin point for all your geometry is dead center. Okay? You add a cone, it's the center of the cone. You add a square, it's the center of the square. That makes sense? In After Effects, we would just grab the pan behind tool and move it to where we want it. It's a little more complex in Blender. Are you ready for this? Here's a vocabulary recap. See the orange, meaning this is selected? So this is my object that is selected. See the little life raft down there? That's my 3D cursor. So that's the 3D cursor. Here's my object I've got selected. And the orange dot is the origin point. Everyone got those three concepts? All right, here we go. Make sure your sphere is high enough above the plane so that you can see the bottom of it, okay? And if not, you might need to like zoom in a little bit. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hide my plane. That's what the smart people do. I'm just going to hide it by clicking the eyeball. Okay. Now I can see the bottom of my sphere. Can everyone see the bottom of their sphere? We're in object mode. We're going to, with the sphere selected and only the sphere selected, hit tab to go to edit mode. I'm going to click off so nothing is selected. If you have wireframe and X-ray on, like I'm turning X-ray off because I do not want to see all this geometry. X-ray is off. Okay. So everyone make sure your X-ray is off. All right. Now we're going to hit C for the circle. And I want to select all of these tries at the bottom just by clicking around. And when I've got them all selected, I hit the escape key to accept my selection. And I'm going to leave them selected. Has everyone gotten that? Shift S. You get another pie chart, pie menu fly out. So I'm going to do Shift S. And here's what I want. I want the 3D cursor to go to my selection. Okay. So I'm going to look at all my options. Cursor to active, cursor to selected. So let's see what happens if I choose cursor to selected. And that did it. Go zoom out. The 3D cursor is now at the bottom faces centered because I want my squash and stretch to take place at the bottom. That makes sense, you guys? Just like the old 2D bouncy ball. Yeah, Brandon.
People lost me in the part where I select on the bottom.
All right, 1 sec. Here's the next step. We've got the 3D cursor where we want it. We're going to hit the tab key to go back to object mode. And you could try and do it by eyeball, Shalia, if you wanted. I believe it's shift and right click with your mouse to move the 3D cursor. Try shift and right click to move the 3D cursor anywhere. I'm going to right click on my object, go to set origin, and I'm going to choose origin to 3D cursor. So we chose the faces that we wanted it to be on. So it's centered at the bottom, went back to object mode. And now we're going to say that was the 3D cursor. So now we're going to snap the origin to the 3D cursor. And now my origin point is at the bottom center of my sphere. Was everyone able to do that? Yeah, no problem at all. So you got your 3D cursor, right? Right click, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Now you got it? Okay, so let's pretend we had like a cone and we wanted the top of the cone to be the swinging point of rotation. You would choose that top vertice, Shift S, origin to selection, and then it would be up at the top. And then you'd go back to object mode, right click, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, and then you'd rotate from that vertex. So you could do it from a vertex or an edge or a face. It's just whatever you have selected. Everyone have that? Few more clicks than in After Effects, but I want you all to understand. So the origin is our anchor point. That's what's going to influence our motion, and we're good. All right, I'm going to turn back on my plane, and I'm going to go back to my camera view. Here is how you keyframe in Blender. Everyone ready? The default timeline has a record button. Don't push it. This is auto record. It will set up keyframes for everything and you'll run into issues. All right. Like let's pretend we hit auto record and start moving stuff around. By the time we want to do scaling on our squash and stretch, it's going to set the scale keyframe at the beginning of the animation. So it's going to scale from the beginning of the animation to where we want to start moving it rather than from where we want to start moving it. Does that make sense? It'll start keyframing here as opposed to like here. Do you got it? It's automatically going to add keyframes. So it's going to cause issues. I want you to be more deliberate as an animator. All right. So I'm going to move my playhead back to the beginning. All right, here we go. First things first, got to select my sphere and I want to put it up near the top. So I'm going to go GZ. Oops. GZ. And I'm going to keep it at the center. I'm not moving it to the side. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to work simpler because we're in a pure 3D space. Got it? We're just going to have the ball drop down once and rise up a little and drop down again. Okay. And then we're going to move it in 3D with our keyframes. Got it? So we're only keeping track of the Z axis for now. It's just going straight down, up, and then down. I've got my object selected. This orange square on the side is the properties for the object you've got selected. Location is your position, rotation, and scale are the same as After Effects. So here's what we're going to do. Let me hover over. I'm just hitting I. There we go. So I hovered over and I hit the I key and all three of them lit up. This means I inserted a keyframe. I is insert keyframe. So you hover over whatever you want and you'll add it. Got it? So I'm saying, and you see these light up right here? The I key. I just hovered over and it's saying we're keyframing these now. Okay? If it's orange, that means you made a change and you did not add a keyframe. All right? And we'll show you what that means. So let's say this falls over 10 frames. You can mouse wheel up or down to zoom in and out of your timeline. So I'm just going to go to the 10 frame and I'm going to go G, Z. I'm going to move it to just before it starts going through the plane. So there it's going through the plane. That's just before. And you see it's orange because I moved it and I did not add a keyframe. So I hover over, I hit the I key again on my keyboard, and now we're good. See, now I've got two keyframes. I hit the space bar. Was everyone able to get that straight down drop? So there's our drop. It dropped 10. It's going to go up a little less and a little slower. So let's say 7 frames, and it's going to fall a shorter distance. So I'm going to go G to grab, Z to move up, have it go up a little bit more. Remember, it's losing energy, so it's not going all the way up. And I'm going to hit I. I'm going to hover over the orange because it changed. Hit I to keyframe. Now I've got 3 keyframes. Like such. Everyone good? If it was 7 frames up, it's got to be less than 7 down because things fall faster. Okay? So I'm going to try 4 or 3. Let's try 3. So I'll just do straight to 20. Nah, we'll do 4, 21. GZ, and I'm going to go to just before it hits the bottom. Right there. And again, this is orange. I have to hit I when I hover over it. And now I've got all my keyframes. I'm going to go and give this a couple extra frames, like let's say frame 26. Now, when you look at your timeline, start 1, end 250. I don't want to render 250 frames of animation. I want to loop this. So I'm just making it 26. I changed my end to 26. So now I can quickly look at my animation and dial it in. Everyone good so far? I'm going to hit save and I'm going to save my file. I'll call it bouncing ball and then hit save because you don't want to lose your work. All right, so we've got our position. Now we're going to start working on our squash and stretch. Remember, by the time it reaches the top, it has to be a perfect circle. And we're going to want it to start its stretch as it's falling, not right from the get-go. So I'm going to go a few frames and say about here. So a few frames from the top is where I'm going to start my squash and stretch. Okay? This is the important part. We've got XYZ here. All right? So I'm going to hover over them and hit I, and all 3 of them lit up and they're keyframed. Was everyone able to do this? I'm going to go 1 frame before impact. This is our impact. I'm going to go to 9 because the impact is on 10. I'm on frame 9. Squash and stretch. Remember, you want to keep the volume. Here's how it's different in Blender. We can see Z is the up and down. That's going to be our squash and stretch. Everyone got that? Because it's the up and down? Now, we're going to go big just so you can see. We're not going to type 170. Perfect circle is 1.0. So what we're going to do is we're going to go 1.7. Got it? So on Z, I'm going to type 1.7, hit enter, and then hover over it and hit I to insert a keyframe. We stretch, but now we got to come in. So we went up 0.7, so we got to come in 0.7. So this is going to become 0.3, and this is going to become 0.3. The X and the Y. I'm going to hover over each and make them hit the I key. Everyone have that first stretch. I'm going to go to the impact. So we stretched up 0.7. We're going to squash down 0.7. So on the impact, it's going to go from 1.7 to, is it 0.3? No, let's see. Wait a sec. So this, yeah, the X would be 1.7. The Y will be 1.7. And the X is 0.3. I'll hover over, hit I. There's our squash. Okay. So once it's a little bit up, I'm going to stretch it again, but less than 1.7 because it's losing energy. So I'll do 1.4. And then these will come in 0.4 from 1. So it'll be 0.6 and 0.6. I'm going to hover over all of them and hit I. So it's starting to see how it's squashing and stretching. Everyone got it? Before it reaches the top, it's got to become a perfect circle. So I'm going to choose about here because that looks like, I'll go one more frame right there. So to make it a perfect circle, I just make them all one again. Hover over and hit the I key. And now we go from our circle to stretch, to a squash, to a stretch, back to our perfect circle. Everyone got it? All right. Yes, Brandon.
I'm a little bit lost. I was so keyframing everything.
No problem. Let's take a look. All right. And yeah, and we're not doing that. We're just doing 2 bounces just because, you know, time constraints. All right. So here we are at the top and we're going to start coming down again. So I'm going to choose right about here to start my second stretch. Now I went 1.7 and as it rose, it was 1.4 because it's losing energy. So it's losing energy again. So I'm going to do 1.3. So right here, I'm going to hover over and hit I, but I'm not going to change it. This is where it's starting the stretch. This is where gravity's pulling to the earth. Got it? The full stretch will be 1 frame before impact, which is right here. So I said 1.3. So it's 1.3 on the Z and 0.7 on the X and the Y. Once I've entered those in, I hit the hover over and hit I. And there's my stretch. And then my squash on the impact will be 0.7. And the X and the Y will be 1.3. I just switched those numbers. Hover over, hit I. I'm going to go 2 frames just to make it easy and then turn them all back to 1 because it ends on a perfect circle. Hover over, hit I, and let's review our animation. There we go. Frame 20. Okay, yeah, so you got the drop for me is starting. Okay, so my after the down, it's for me that's frame 18. So just before, so frame 20 for me is 0.7, 0.7, 1.3. That's why we're only doing 2 bounces. Got it? So everyone has time to absorb this. So on the impact, which was frame 21, 1.3, 1.3, 0.7. And then I just went 2 frames later and made it a perfect circle again with 1.0 on all axes. Any questions on adding keyframes or editing the XYZ or position values? Everyone good? Okay, same thing as After Effects. Don't get scared. All right. So since everyone's got that, I'm going to hit save. And here, I'm going to go slow. Everyone ready? Watch the screen. Remember, the top left of every panel can be edited in Blender. We're going to go to the top left of our timeline, and we're going to choose the graph editor. Don't worry. Watch this. Got a whole bunch of twirl downs. All right. Now, here's how you do it fast and easy. We just went down Z-axis, right? I'm going to click the eyeball for X and Y location and my scales. Look at that. Now I'm only seeing one speed graph. Isn't that easier? So you just click the eyeball, hide what you don't want to see, and you work that way. So here's our impact. Remember, when it hits the ground, that's the fastest velocity. So I click once on the handle, and since we're in Blender, you hit G to grab. I'm just going to hit Shift to hold it straight. Yep. There we go. I'll speed into it. So now it's going to go fastest to the ground. See that? And once it's at the top, this should be the slowest point. So I'm going to grab that handle, G to grab, and I'm going to go away from it. So now let's check out my velocity. See that? That's a bit better. Let's see, where's my next keyframe? It's right here. That's where it's going to speed into it again. So I'm going to zoom in with my middle mouse, select the handle, G to grab, zoom into it. And there we go. That is changing the velocity. It automatically eased it for us. That's why we had the graph handles. See the difference in my timing now? Much more deliberate and intentional. All right. So, everyone ready to have your mind blown? Well, thank you. All right. Always look at your gizmo up here. I've got mild dyslexia and I have trouble with left and right. Okay. So this gizmo is the biggest blessing in Blender. Look at this. X is my side to side in this view. Got it? When you're spinning around and orbiting in 3D space, it's not always going to be X side to side. It depends upon how you're looking at it. Got it? So I always use my gizmo. It's like using the stars above to find your way home. I know X will be side to side because of how it is here. Got it? Look at the gizmo and see which way it's facing. So my side to side in this view is X. I'm going to turn off my C, and here's my X. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to exit my speed graph, and I'm going to go to my dope sheet. So I clicked here, and I got summary. I'm going to twirl down. I'm going to twirl down again, and here's what we got. Does everyone see all their keyframes broken down by layer? X location, that's my side to side. Here I am right over that keyframe. So check this out. I go over to my transform here, or I could just go G, X, move it on the X, and look what's happening. It's orange. I'm going to hit I to accept. Now watch what happens. Now it's moving in an arc. Was everyone able to get that arc motion by adjusting the X after we already made our keyframes? I went to the 0, selected the cube. I went G to grab, X to only move on the X, slid it over to the left side of the screen, and then I hovered over the change in location, hit I to create the new keyframe to get this arc. Was everyone able to get that arcing motion? Okay, so now I'm going to go to my up. This is my up right here. I'm going to move it a little to the right. So I'm going to go G, X, move it over to the right, hover over my keyframe change, hit the I key. So now I'm moving from the left, bounces, and it's rising over to the right. And lastly, the third keyframe, I'm going to move that over to the left. The right. Sorry, see, I told you, this is why I always look at the gizmo. I'll move it over there a little bit more. Oops, I did not accept the keyframe. G, X, G, X, slide it over, hover over, hit I. Now let's test it out. Yep, look at that. Bounce, bounce. Do you see the benefit of doing your keyframes on one axis, then going back in and dialing it, your X or your Y, for a simpler workflow? Rather than trying to plot it out in 3D space where there's so many infinite variables of what can go right or wrong. Was everyone able to change their X in afterward? Okay. So we edited our keyframes, we edited our graph, and we did all that. Now, we always kick it up a notch here. When you're around me, you learn a little, I make sure you learn, and then we kick it up, okay? Now, what do we got in our scene? We've got a light, a plane, a sphere, and I'm going to click on the camera in the outliner. Remember, this is the outliner. Now, everybody watch, and this will save you so many headaches. See down here, we got all our tools to get to the different properties for things. Like if I select my light and I want to edit my light, I click on the light bulb and I can make it brighter, all that stuff. Because those are the properties for the light. You got that? Now my camera, I can click here and I can edit the properties for the camera. Cool. Got it? But this is not how I animate my camera, okay? I go to the orange object, so the camera, and I treat it as an object. Here's your location and rotation, all right? So let's go to our first keyframe. I can hover over my location, hit I. I can hover over my rotation and hit I, all right? And remember, the less keyframes you have, the smoother it's going to be. So I'm going to go to my last keyframe and I'm going to hit the N key and I'm going to make sure I'm in my view. Camera to view is clicked on. So I'm going to zoom in a little and look, these turned orange. I'm on the right track. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to orbit it a little bit, move it up a little bit, orbit it a little bit more, hover over all the orange, hit I again, and look at that. Now I've got an animated camera to go with my 3D scene. I'm going to delete all my keyframes. So here's a fun thing. If you click on the top keyframe, it does all of them below. See that? So I'm going to hit X, delete keyframes. I'm going to go over here, X, delete keyframes. All right, here we go from scratch. Camera is selected in the outliner. You good? Orange object transform is open. I'm going to hover over the X, my location, hit I. I'm going to hover over my rotation and hit I. Okay? Now, in my 3D viewport, I hit the N key to pull up my side panel, and I want to be in my view, the view tab. It's right. I shouldn't have gone off it. Here it is. It's right here. So you got your view and move camera to view clicked on, right? So that's on. So I'm going to hit end. So I'm going to hover over all these, hit I. We already did that. Okay. You good? I'm going to go to my last end of my motion right here. Okay. So since the camera is going to follow our mouse clicks, I'm going to scroll up and zoom in a little bit. And you see how these changed? But I'm not hitting I yet. We're able to scroll in. Now I'm going to hold down Shift, press my middle mouse, and pan over a little bit. So I've got some room for the motion to continue if I need to. We're able to do that. And those numbers changed again. So now I'm going to just give it a little bit of rotation for fun. So I'm going to hold down my middle mouse and pivot like that to get some rotation. Okay. So now I'm going to hold down Shift and my middle mouse, I'm going to push down to tilt up a little bit. Okay. So I'm happy with this ending camera position. Now I'm going to hover over, hit I again, and preview my motion. Like that. All right. Everyone good? So you guys just did your first animation with some of the 12 principles of motion. We've got easy ease, slow and slow out. We've got squash and stretch. You've got arcs, which is another one of the 12 principles. And we moved the camera. You adjusted your speed graph and you did all of that in 46 minutes. That's a lot to soak in, But like I said, I'm teaching you Blender going from After Effects to Blender. And you think about your workflow as an animator in After Effects, that'll follow through as an animator in Blender. Now, did you think this is what, our third Blender class? That I'd say, hey, by the time we get to the third class, you'll be doing squash and stretch in a 3D space and moving the camera in 3D. But you did it. You know why? Because I wouldn't throw anything at you that you couldn't handle, and I knew you'd be able to get this. Object mode, move stuff around. Edit mode, edit your geometry. You know, you can bevel it, Command B. Then you could use your mouse wheel to add some segments. All right, cool. I'm going to hit save. Oh, you know what? All right. Here's what I'm going to do. Up at my render settings. So here's the renderer. It's Eevee. I could click, my render to see what it's going to look like. And here's what it's going to look like because we don't have any materials. All right. That's fine. If you're using Eevee, yeah, we got some time. I'll talk about Eevee a little bit. Eevee's the faster render engine, but it's harder to get it to look good. Cycles has better lighting and shading, but the render's slower, okay? So first I'll show you a little bit of settings in Eevee, then I'll show you a little bit of settings in Cycles. Well, I'll do it backwards. I'll do Cycles first. So if we were going to render this in Cycles, look at the difference already. Now, sample number. The higher the sample number, the less noise will be in your shot and the more detail there'll be, okay? I'm going to do 100. I'm going to click denoise, and for here, I'm going to do 100. Hit enter. I'm going to select my sphere. I'm in object mode, don't forget. Right click, shade smooth. Okay. Now let's take a look at this light. I'm going to go to my light bulb. Let's give it some color. Let's try green just because, no one really uses green. We'll darken it a little bit. All right, there we go. So we did all that. Let's go back to our camera for the render. We chose denoise. We lowered our samples. Film. I'm going to click on film. I'm going to click transparent. Now we've got a transparent background. And lastly, let's try color management. sRGB, Filmic, we talked about this before. Filmic log and raw will give you more detail. Like it won't be so crushed and cartoony looking. Like it'll have more dynamic range. So I chose Filmic. Everyone good with that so far? So we got that. That's if we're using Cycles. Then you use your printer paper right here. This is where you could set up your resolution, your frame rate. We're starting on frame 1, ending on frame 26. Sure. This is where everything's going to go. So I would click this folder and say where I want it to go. And, you guys would choose thaw space or, your desktop if you're working on your own machine. I'm going to choose desktop and I'll make a folder. I'll call it Lab 03. And I'll choose that one. I hit accept. That's where it's going to go. Since we've got a transparent background, I'm going to want RGBA. That's RGB plus alpha. Alpha is your transparency. Make sense? I'm going to choose PNG because that is transparent. Color depth, I'm going to choose 16-bit to get more detail. And let's see, anything in color management? No, so I'm happy with that. Okay, that's that. Everyone understand alpha, higher bit depth? The beauty of Blender is this is going to save it as individual PNG files. I never render out a movie because if it crashes, you lose your render. If you do it frame by frame as PNGs, let's say you got to frame 110 of 300. Well, you've got 110 frames rendered, so you just render from 111 to 300. You never start over again. It keeps what it rendered. Make sense? It's a non-destructive rendering workflow. It's beautiful. I wish Adobe After Effects would adopt this. That makes sense? You good, Shalia? Yeah. All right. So that's it for doing it in Blender. Now let's do Eevee. So I'm going back to my camera. I'm going to change cycles to Eevee. And you see how the shading changed? All right. Now, first box I'm going to click on in Eevee is ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion gives you better shading. So where like edges meet, the shading underneath that edge gets darker. And then as you get further away from that edge, it's more gradated out. So it's more realistic. It adds depth to your shadows. Got it? I'm going to click Bloom. Bloom will give you some highlights and light effects. And lastly, I'm going to check on Screen Space Reflections. They're the three I added from there. Okay? And we're still at Filmic. Everyone good? All right. Now, let's try one frame at Eevee. Won't take long at all. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kick this up another notch. I'm going to click on my sphere. I'm going to go to my material right here. I'm going to click New to give it a new material. This is a little overview of the principled BSDF shader. Next week, well, actually I should say, what's day? Tuesday? Thursday, we're going to hit nodes hard. And by the end of that class, you're going to be like, man, look out. You know, I'm a stone cold killer when it comes to node trees. Yeah.
Get to the,
Okay. So see the red circle above the checkered grid?
Yeah.
Checkered grid's your texture. The red circle is your material. So I clicked on there and then I hit new material for it. Were you able to get a new material? I'll hit minus. So here's what I see. Do you see this? You got your sphere selected. You hit here, and are you seeing this? Then you hit the new button. So there's only a couple things you got to mess around with in here, like principal color. That's the color of your object. So I'm going to choose purple. Why not? Because I'm a cool guy. All right, now it's purple. Look at that. Wow. Subsurface scattering. That's light hitting an object and being absorbed by it. Things like wax, butter, skin, plastic. Those have light absorption to them. Leaves. Got it? Light hits it and goes a little bit into it. So I'm going to give this a little bit of subsurface scattering. See, now some light's hitting it and going into it. All right? That's what that does. Metallic. That is, will it reflect the scene and lights like metal or more like plastic? So a lower number is more like plastic. A higher number is more like metal. I'm going to keep it at a low number. All right? Your specular is how hot your highlights get when they hit the object. Like if you look at my edge where the light's hitting it, see how it's growing more and more as I increase that? I'm just going to keep it at 0.5. Roughness. This is how it reflects the lights and the environment. So 0 would be like glass or water. 1 would be very rough, like a brick. A brick is not going to reflect light or the scene. You know, it's not reflective at all. So I'm going to lower the roughness a little bit. And you're seeing that change. And that's what I'm going to do for this. Okay. So you got a little bit of overview of the principled BSDF thing. We adjusted the roughness so it's a little reflective. Okay. Everyone good so far? All right. Now I'm going to give you a quick introduction to HDRIs. Is it HDRI Haven? Polyhaven. So Polyhaven has free HDRIs. And you'll see how quickly this jumps up in quality with an HDRI. I'm just going to pick Thatch Cathedral, okay? So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to download it. Minimize you. All right, here we go. So we downloaded an HDRI. I'm actually going to unzip it. Let's see, where'd mine go? Oh, it's an EXR file, so I don't even need to unzip it. All right. So right here, this is your world properties. Looks like a globe with an axis going through it. We'll click on that. Everyone got it? Now, here's the goofy thing about this one. See color right here, this yellow dot? If you click on that dot next to color, that's going to open up, bless you, that's going to open up the menu for it. So we went over here to our world. Color, I'm going to click on the dot. This is the menu. I'm going to want an environment texture. So I'm clicking on that. Pink means it's missing an image. Got it? We're going to use that HDRI we downloaded. So I'm going to click open. It's on my desktop. And it is right here. I click open image. Look at the difference in the shading and the reflections. Now it's reflecting the world around it. We already turned on transparent, so we're not seeing the HDRI, but it's showing up in the reflections. That's what helps things look like they're anchored into a scene, the HDRI in the environment. Everyone understand? That was 1 minute's worth of work, and this already looks a billion times better. Yeah, Brandon.
Background be transparent again.
No problem at all. That's a great question. Sam will tell you the answer. I clicked on the camera, and this is an Eevee. Went to film, and I clicked on transparent. Got it? All right. Now, I'm going to switch from Eevee to Cycles. Look how much better that is in Cycles. And in Cycles, to get to transparent, it is under Film and Transparent right there. All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of a texture to this plane. Going to go to my material, hit a new material, and let's do a little bit of subsurface. And let's turn the roughness down a little bit to see a little bit of the world in it. And let's turn up the metallic, just for the fun of it. All right. That's a little bit more interesting. Let's see. Let's do the roughness to that, just for the fun of it. All right. So I want to render my scene. If I hit function F12, it'll render this one frame. And I already decreased this. It's at 100. It's not at 4,000. So function F12, it's going to start rendering it out. I can just zoom in and out with my mouse wheel. This will take a moment to do that. Now, while that's going in the background, it's already half done. Now, my machine's pretty fast. Now, I didn't adjust the lighting or any of that stuff, but the HDRI did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Oh, okay. Here it is. Sorry. Up at the top. See render? Right there in my top menu. If I click on that, so F12, which we already did, was render image. But if you go to render up at the top, render animation, control F12, that will render out each one of those frames. So let's say that took me 1 minute to render that one frame. This is 26 frames, be a 26-minute render. But it would save each image as it went along. Make sense to everybody? All right, so I'm going to go back here, switch it back to Eevee. And I'm going to go to a frame where there's some interesting stretch happening, like right here. I've got some reflection. I'm just going to render this one frame with my F12 at Eevee, and let's see how long that takes. That's it. So it instantly did it on my machine. It's done. See that? So Eevee is exponentially faster, but the lighting and shading are a little bit not as good as Cycles. Ta-da. And just a reminder, I got to my rendered view by clicking on the last one. So it's wireframe, solid shaded. This one will show you the materials you've got. And this is your final render with all your effects and lights and whatnot applied to it. All right. Look at what we covered in 1 hour. Hats off to you. Great job tonight. Boom.
So I wonder how the animated 3D movies like do that.
They would have render farms. So that's where you've got a room full of computers and they split out the render. So it's like computer 20 is doing frame 1 and frame 5. Computer 25 is doing frame 3 and 36. So they get the thing done.
But even just like animating it though too, were they animated like this, or did they have like
They-
different methods?
More or less, they would basically be doing this. You know, it's just they're just things have come a long way. Like, I mean, look how quickly that rendered in even that's not half bad.
Yeah, it looks so realistic, but like then compare it to like the first Toy Story movie, like the textures and that, like how it looks.
Yep. No, I hear you.
Makes me wonder how they did.
Wait till we do nodes Thursday. Because you're going to be like, man, nodes intimidated me, but now I always teach the why and the how, you know, so that it just opens up. So does everyone feel like they're learning Blender a little bit easier than, you know, previously? Okay, because it's there's a difference between knowing how to do something and being able to teach how to do it. And this is my first time doing Blender because I used to do Cinema 4D. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take it from this approach. And I think it's working pretty well. So, all right, lab time. I'm going to take a look at Sam's tires. Shalia, do you have anything for me? Oh, you do? Okay. Just put it in Google Drive and let me know when it's up there.